Hello. So in my last video, there was two things that I kind of took away from the ending of that video that I spoke about. One of them was that I was promising to try to not take 6 months between getting my next video up, and ta-da, I achieved that barely. Well, not barely, I think it's only been a couple months. But I am going to try to do videos a little bit more often than I do. I also wanted to look at doing some different types of videos. This is an example of some of the new types of videos that I want to do. If you've watched some of my other videos, a lot of times the videos are really specific to just one book, usually a rare book or a very collectible or expensive book. But in addition to those books, I'm also generally collecting a lot of other books, either just random copies of books that I really enjoy, signed first printings of other books that I like that aren't necessarily rare or expensive, limited editions. I do a little bit of leather-bound collecting, stuff like Easton Press. So I collect a lot of other books. So I just thought I'd take a quick look back at some of the books that I've collected towards the end of last year in 2018, some of the recent ones, ones that stood out to me or ones that I was really pleased to find. And we'll try to do a couple more like this. I've got a few more that I've been grabbing that are in addition to these that I'll probably do in the next video. But we'll go ahead and dive in. These are just going to be some quick looks at some of the other types of books that I've been collecting. So this first one here is After Me Comes the Flood, published by, who was this published by? I just completely forgot. Serpent's Tail. This is a first printing, and if you watched my last video, it was actually also a look at all three of Sarah Perry's books that I've collected signed first editions of. This was actually, I needed a reading copy for this one because I didn't feel comfortable reading the other signed first printing that I had, and I found this one for $3. But this one is actually an ex-library copy, which I usually would never buy, but I just needed a good reading copy. And they've actually laminated this book on all three sides. It's got like a barcode sticker that's been put on here, probably for the library. The inside actually has a library card still in it with some dates on it. This is the Lancashire County Library. Sorry that this ended up over here. Looks like the last time it got checked out was February 9th, 2017. So sometime between February 9, 2017 to late 2018, it managed to cross over the ocean and get over here to the United States, and I picked up the copy. So yeah, that's this copy here. I thought that was pretty funny to find. It was really cheap. I don't really think stuff like this is worth a whole lot, even though a first printing of this book is actually really rare. Just because of the fact that it's got a lot of the library stuff on it, it's been laminated and all that. So I didn't really buy it, obviously, as collectible, but it is actually technically a pretty rare book. Next up, I have a copy of The Writing in the Stone by Irving Finkel. This one was published by, I think, Medina Press. They're kind of a small press publisher over in the UK. I actually got this one via Kickstarter. So I try to periodically look and back books that are on there, and this one was an interesting one. It kind of caught my eye. Irving Finkel is kind of a curator over in some of the museums in the UK, some of the primary ones, really specific to a lot of cuneiform translations and things like that. Pretty well known in that particular area, but this is a work of fiction that he did, and the concept is very interesting. I'd recommend that you look it up if you're interested in it. It's a really short book. They did a few versions of the book on the Kickstarter, and this was basically the nicer, more collectible version of it, which is the one that I backed. And there's kind of a lot of interesting components to this book, so I'll try to very quickly take a look at the unique aspects of it. It's technically kind of a limited edition, is the best way to describe it. First off, it's this black book. It's got sort of this mythological creature look here on the front in red, and then there's a raised gold letter at the bottom with his name on it. And the title has been sort of, I don't even want to say kind of die cut. It's almost like a laser cut of some sort. It's almost sharp, and the cover is very hard. It's not a very traditional board to it. The back is blank, and then on the back here, you can see there's actually a magnetic clamp here. So it's very interesting, very different. It is gold on all edges of the book, so they did gilt edges there. The inside has got kind of these printed end papers that are very specific to what the story is about. You can kind of see through here how the piece has been cut. It's a very interesting book. They did 243 copies of it of this particular limited edition were done through the Kickstarter, so this is number 234 of the 243. It's signed by the author, and it's actually a very nice looking book. It's got these really wide margins in it. They did these really nice custom pieces of art at the beginning of each chapter. It looks really cool. And it reads very, very briskly, really nice pacing on it. A lot of it has to do with just how they set it up with these really wide margins here. But again, it was a very interesting book. I have really no idea, stuff like this, really what value it has. I think I spent about $40, if I recall correctly, on the Kickstarter for it. I've seen one person that actually took their version of this and put it up on Abe Books, and they have it, I think, listed at about $150. I don't really know really if that's actually accurate or not, because I don't know what the demand is for a book like this. But I just wanted to support the author on it. I thought it was interesting. I thought it looked cool. And so there we are. That's another interesting limited edition. So this one caught my eye, and this is actually a case of a book catching my eye that I wasn't really actually in the market for. I just saw it at a bookstore and had to grab it. If you've watched some of my other videos, you know that I have a thing for dust jackets. So if I see an interesting, eye-catching dust jacket, I jump on top of it. And this is Till We Have Faces, a novel by C.S. Lewis. It's got this really interesting, to me anyway, cover on the front. It's very vivid. It's got lots of these really cool colors in it. It just catches your eye from a distance. This was published by Harcourt, Brace and Company. You can see there's a little bit of chipping here on the base of it, a couple pieces missing, so it's not in perfect condition. The front of the cover really has held up really well, of the dust jacket, and the back has held up pretty well too. It's just got an image of C.S. Lewis there on the back. This was actually, if I'm remembering correctly, this was C.S. Lewis's last book. I actually have always planned on reading more of C.S. Lewis. I read the Chronicles of Narnia growing up as a kid. I've read the Screwtape Letters, and I think that's actually the only things of his that I've read. But this is on my list. This was basically sort of a rewriting of a mythical tale that he covered. And the book has, if you take off the dust jacket, just sort of this red cloth on it. It's got this really cool image there on the spine of the book. This particular book is actually I believe this is a second state of the book. It's got these really, really lovely images in it. And this was, as I said, this was really the last book that he wrote. It was published in 1956, originally in the UK, and the first American edition was printed in 1957. From the little bit of research that I've done on it, I believe this is a second state, because I think the original first American edition didn't actually specify that it was the first American edition. I may be wrong on that, but that's from what I've seen in my initial research, what it is. But again, it's got these really cool images to it. And the top of the book has this really nice, it's slightly faded now, but it's almost kind of like this purple top stain that happens here on the top. And I absolutely love any kind of edge painting and top stains on books. I think that makes the book look really attractive. In terms of value on this one, it is kind of a fairly rare book to come across, even though this is kind of the second state on it. I was able to get a pretty good deal on it. I think I spent $50 or $60 for it. From what I can tell, a good copy like this is probably worth closer to about $100. There's just not very many of them for sale. If it was a true first edition of the book, it would probably worth dramatically more than that, probably closer to like $300 or $400 or more. But for the price that I was able to get it at, I thought it was a really good deal. It's a really beautiful book, so I was really happy that I was able to kind of stumble across that one and add it to the collection. This one's kind of an interesting one too. I got this one for really cheap. This is Three Dark Crowns by Kendare Blake. This is a Harper teen fantasy, and I believe it was part of a trilogy, and this is the first book in the trilogy. I really don't read young adult, but somehow through my Goodreads, this had been recommended to me, and I had added it onto my Goodreads before I even knew actually that it was kind of a teen-based book. So when I found a copy in the local bookstore, I thought I'd go ahead and just grab it. It turns out this actually is a signed first printing of the book. I usually don't, in the book it's got like some bookmarks and some things, so I think this is some sort of promotional copy here. There's actually a signed bookplate in here. I pretty much always avoid buying any books that have signed bookplates in them. I was able to get this book for I think about $15 or so, so I got it pretty cheap, and that's why I was fine with that. And if you're going to buy a book that has a signed bookplate in it, I'd highly recommend you get a bookplate kind of like this one here, where it has, in this case, this is a bookplate from the publisher, from Harper Teen. So I'd highly recommend, if you are going to get one, don't use a generic bookplate. If it's not one specifically from the publisher, probably best to avoid it. The book has got this nice two-tone cover here. I haven't read it. It is on my reading list. Again, not really ultra valuable or anything like that, or ultra rare. At least as far as I know. I haven't really looked it up, to be honest with you, but it was on my reading list, so snatching a copy that looks to be in excellent condition and signed by the author, I just went ahead and grabbed it. These next books, this is actually 2 books by the same author, and I read through both of these books right at the end of the year and at the start of 2019, and this author just absolutely flew up my favorite author list right now. This is Iain Reid, and this is his first book, I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Really short book, as you can see, but really this was one of the best twist ending books that I've read in a very, very, very long time. I flew through this book. It's very unsettling. I almost would say you could call it a horror book, but it's really not horror in the true sense of the term. I read this book and instantly was like, what else has this guy written? And he had just coincidentally released this book called Foe, so I went and snatched this one up too. Another great book. It has more twists in it. It's just like that one. That seems to be this guy's style. I believe these are the only 2 fictional books he wrote. I think he'd written some other stuff before. Really, really great books. I highly recommend checking out both of these. Again, it's I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Iain Reid and Foe. I'm Thinking of Ending Things has actually become a international bestseller, and I believe there's actually a TV show coming to Netflix, or a film sponsored by Netflix that's going to be coming to television. So keep an eye out for that. I suspect that will make stuff like this, the book, even more collectible once it comes out, especially if it turns into something successful like with what happened with Bird Box. But again, I was able to reach out to a Canadian bookseller that had both of these, reach out and get a good deal on both of them. They came from an author event, so there's the bookmark included in here from the event that he was at. But both copies are signed first printings of the books. Again, I highly recommend these. If you're looking for something good to read, go check them out. I really can't recommend these books high enough. I've also got a copy here of Markus Zusak's Bridge of Clay. This is a signed first printing of this book. I haven't actually read this yet. If you're not familiar with him, he is the author of The Book Thief, which was an absolutely huge, wildly successful book. I get the feeling this one has not been anywhere near as successful as that. It's been a long time, I believe 8 or 9 years since that one came out, and this was his new follow-up book to that. It's as I've gathered, a very interesting book. Again, it's on my reading list. I haven't actually read it yet. This one is a signed copy, if you can call that a signature. It's certainly one of the most interesting signatures that I've seen. I pretty much always avoid buying copies that have stickers on here. I think this is only the second one I've ever got that has a signed copy sticker on it. Kind of a pet peeve at all. If you're shopping for signed copies, it's generally best to avoid getting one like that. Always prefer to get one that just has just the straight up dust jacket on it. You don't want any stickers on it. In this case, the signed copy was the exact same price as the non-signed copy, and I'm fairly certain the publisher printed a huge number of these books, not only the first printing, but signed copies of them. It seems like there's almost as many signed copies as non-signed copies. So again, not really collectible, but it was a new one that I grabbed and added to my collection of signed books. And then last but not least, this is a copy of All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. This book I read early in 2018, late in 2017. I read it a couple years behind. If you're not familiar with it, this book was published in 2014 and by Scribner, and won the Pulitzer Prize in 2015. After it won the Pulitzer Prize, it was already a bestseller, but it went on to sell an incredible number of copies after that and has been wildly, wildly successful. This is certainly one of the best books that I've read in the past few years. It absolutely lives up to the hype. If you haven't read it yet, go look for this book. Go check it out. Go buy yourself a copy of it. It's a really, really good book. I'm generally a bit skeptical about World War II books. It's such a oversaturated market for fiction. It's a great playground for writing, so I understand why so many people like to write about it, like to read about it. But this one was very unique and interesting from a lot of the other World War II fictional books that I've read. This copy here, this is another example of me kind of bending and breaking my own rules. I've wanted to get a copy of this for a long time. I was able to get this one for really, really cheap. This is a signed first printing of the book. which is very rare. They've printed a large number of these. Most of the books that you find now in a bookstore are probably going to be the 20th, printing, 30th printing. They didn't actually print a huge number of the first printings of this book. The publisher did do some signed copies of the first printing where they inserted a blank leaf into the front of the book that the author signed. So those are out there, but it's less common to find one that's actually signed on, for example, the title page instead of on a blank sheet. So let me see if I can find that on here. You can see this one here has been signed on the title sheet and is officially a first printing of the book, and you'll want to look for that number line all the way down to 1 there just to make sure that it is a true first printing. This book, the reason I was able to get it so cheap, there's a couple different reasons. First off, it's not in the best condition. It looks probably pretty good in the video here, and the dust jacket is in decent condition, but the issue is there's actually a large kind of mark coming down the center of the dust jacket. And when I got this book, it actually was included with a sheet from a book collector's assigned first edition book club, where every month they would send the subscribers a signed first printing of a book. And this was the book that month. And it looks like whoever got this book had, I guess, cut it out of the box and perhaps maybe ran a knife down the center of it. It didn't cut through, but it left a mark going all the way down the center of the dust jacket. So that's basically why I was able to get this book as cheap as I was. So there are some flaws. The book itself isn't in perfect condition, and obviously there's this big gash going down the center of it. But this is actually a pretty collectible book, and that's why I got it when I did, even though it was marked up. Just a signed copy of All the Light We Cannot See is probably worth somewhere in the range of $75 to $100. So you'll find copies that are sold that are really late printings that are still fetching in that price range. This is just a really popular book. So if you're looking to get a signed first printing, be prepared that it's not going to be ultra cheap. The signed first printings that were done on the blank pages are typically fetching in the range of $300. And a signed first printing that's on like the title page that's in excellent condition can fetch, $400 or $500. So it's a pretty rare book. And so when I saw a copy, even one that was unfortunately more beat up than I would normally get, I was able to negotiate a really good price on it and get the copy. At some point, I'm probably going to look at probably selling this copy and getting a nicer version of it. Just because it's just a pet peeve of mine, and I always try to buy books, and I always recommend, if you are a book collector or you're new to book collecting, always try to buy the nicest copy that you can. Those are the copies that are going to hold up, they're going to have the best value long term, so it's better to get one that's in high condition versus one that's a lot cheaper that is in worse condition. Again, I broke my own rule on that one just because I passed a deal on that one that's too good to pass up, and sometimes that's going to be the case. So again, these are some of the books that I grabbed at sort of the end of the year. I've got some other books that I'll be sharing on the next one. I do plan on still doing more of the kind of single book, higher end or rarer book videos. I've got a couple books that I'm actually talking to some booksellers on right now that I think are really interesting, that would be good ones to look at. Obviously those books are typically either very rare, so they're harder for me to find and get a copy of, or in some cases they're really expensive. Some of the books that I've done the other videos on are worth $5,000 or $6,000. So usually when I do buy those books, they can eat up my budget for buying rare books for a little while. So I won't be doing those as common, but hopefully I'll start doing more stuff like this, just looking at some of the other books that I've got. If you guys think this is interesting, let me know in the comments. I'd be happy to do more books looking at, some of the other things that I'm doing, maybe doing a monthly book haul. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you think, and thanks for stopping by to watching the video. Hope you guys have a great rest of the day.